Cuando a los marines de un puertón bien grande, era diferente, abrían así uno para acá y otro para allá para que el carro pasara. Y cuando yo vi el marín, yo sentí que abrieron, que ya cerraron, yo dije, tierra libre. Pero no fue free. Free de Fidel Castro, pero para mí tenía mi corazón partido por mi familia.
In the early 1960s, Gloria Martinez and hundreds of other anti-Castro Cubans took refuge on the U.S. naval base in Guantanamo Bay. Half a century later, 24 of them still live here.
Our Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you for your love.
The Navy take care of us real good here. They don't charge you rent. And a lot of things that they give you here, you know, that if you live somewhere else, you'd have to pay for it.
The Guantanamo Cubans are one of those quirks of history, a small group of people battered by decisions made long ago and by world events beyond their control. The exiles have lived their adult lives within a 17-mile perimeter fence. They've married and divorced, raised children and grown old. When they get sick, Navy doctors care for them. When they die, they're buried near the beach in the base cemetery. Most live in a neighborhood of single-story houses provided by the U.S. Navy, a Cuban village recreated on an American naval base. Around the 1959 Cuban Revolution, Guantanamo was a bustling American base. Thousands of Cubans commuted to jobs on the base. But as relations frayed between Washington and Havana, desperate Cuban workers sought safety on the base. Engaged in a Cold War duel with Fidel Castro and the Soviets, President John F. Kennedy was happy to give them shelter.
I have emphasized before that this was a struggle of Cuban patriots against a Cuban dictator.
Many refugees, such as Ramon Romero, had relatives imprisoned or killed for opposing the Castro regime.
My grandfather said, stay here, or otherwise you're going to end up in jail or dead.
At some point during the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and all that time frame, we started legitimizing people that said, hey, I don't want to go back to their side. At the time, the Navy offered them a safe haven, and we said, hey, you're welcome to stay here until this gets resolved. And here we are, half a century later, they're still here.
It's not clear how President Obama's decision to restore diplomatic relations with Havana will affect the exiles. But 92-year-old Ramon Baudin fears going home would be risky.
¿Cómo voy a volver a ir otra vez para acá? Para que me maten, me cojan y yo no sé lo que me iban a hacer.
These days, the exiles are putting the Navy in a bind. Guantanamo, though less busy than during the Cold War, is still an active military base. There's the controversial detention center, and ships still stop here for fuel and supplies.
Touch the floor, hips.
Most of the original exiles moved to the U.S. years ago. The 24 that remain are mostly in their 70s or 80s. A couple are in their 90s.
All the associated health problems that go along with the aging population, we're finding ourselves, it's an increase in resources we need to provide.
The Navy opened a 24-hour assisted living facility on base. Civilian aides transport the elderly residents to doctor's appointments and exercise classes. The estimated cost for the aides, about $200,000 a year. But as the Guantanamo Cubans have grown older, tending to their health and welfare threatens to outstrip the capacity of the Navy, which is under congressional orders to care for the exiles.
For a lot of them, we're talking 5 years to a decade where they exceed my ability to care for them. It's a tough problem because I don't envision us forcing them to go and leave the island because of the commitment we previously made to them, but it may come to that.
Gloria Martinez used a fake ID to sneak into the Guantanamo base in 1961. Her husband was in the Cuban Army and had battled against Castro's rebels. The couple fled to the base amid threats to his life, leaving their families behind.
Yo venía entre mí, Jorgelina, para que no se me olvidara el nombre.
Approaching the gate, Gloria forgot the name on her fake ID, but the Cuban policeman didn't catch on. Today, the name is etched on her memory.
Never in my life I forget the name now.
Decades later, the cancer survivor remains here in part because of the lifetime medical care. But mostly, she doesn't want to be far from her home country, whose mountains she can see from her house.
Le doy la gracia a Dios de sentirme aquí en un pedazo de Cuba que está bajo el sistema americano.